Girl with the Black Dog. The girl with the black dog. Elara named him Shadow, which was neither original nor entirely accurate. He wasn't made of darkness, not really. He was made of weight. Shadow was a dog of improbable density. He looked like a Labrador, large, sleek, and black as polished coal, but he carried himself like a statue carved from basalt. When he sat on the rug, it wasn't a gentle collapse, it was a permanent indentation. When he rested his massive head on Elara's thigh, the pressure was immediate, an anchor dragging her downward, and only Elara could see him. The black dog appeared the summer Elara was 17, right after her father left. The family car, packed with his hastily assembled possessions, pulled away from the curb, and Shadow materialized, silent and stoic, already sitting by the front door. "Oh, look, a handsome dog," her mother Clara said brightly, tears still drying on her cheeks. "Where did you come from, boy?" Clara stepped right through him, her leg passing through his obsidian flank as if he were heat haze. Shadow didn't even flinch. He just watched Elara, his amber eyes deep and knowing. Elara knew instantly and absolutely that he was hers. Shadow was an immaculate companion for grief. He never barked, never demanded food, and, most importantly, never offered advice. He was pure presence. He was the quiet echo of the hole left by her father's absence. A dog of great demands? As the months bled into the school year, Shadow's weight became a problem. He didn't just walk beside her, he pressed his body against her. He was a constant, low-level physical drain. Sitting in history class, trying to focus on the French Revolution, Elara would feel Shadow's massive head resting on her lap, and the weight would steal the breath from her lungs. She'd grip the edge of the desk, her knuckles white, just to counteract the downward pull. Her friends noticed the change. "Elara, why are you always walking so slowly?" her best friend Maya asked one day as they left the cafeteria. "You look like you're wading through cement." Elara looked down at Shadow, who was leaning so heavily against her right leg that her gait was visibly crooked. "Just tired, I guess," she mumbled, shifting the invisible weight. "And why do you never want to go out anymore?" Shadow was particularly problematic in public. When they went to a movie, he insisted on lying across her feet, his body an icy block that kept her pinned to the seat. The laughter of the audience felt distant, muffled by the pressure. When she tried to go to a party, the combined anxiety and volume of the crowd would make Shadow grow slightly larger, slightly denser, until she had to retreat to the quiet sanctuary of her bedroom, where he would immediately contract back to his usual size, settling heavily at the foot of her bed. He wasn't malicious, he was just needy. He required her complete and undivided attention, and his currency was gravity. The world began to shrink to the places Shadow found tolerable. Her bedroom, the dusty attic, and the secluded woods behind her house. One chilly Saturday, Clara found Elara in the living room, weeping quietly, pinned to the sofa. Shadow was lying across her entire chest, his weight a suffocating blanket. "Elara, honey, what is it?" Clara rushed over, alarmed. I can't move," Elara gasped, the pressure preventing her from taking a full breath. Clara, of course, saw only a girl curled up on the couch. She sat beside her daughter and rubbed her back, her hand passing right through the dense fur of the black dog. "You've been spending so much time alone, sweetie," Clarice said, her voice soft with worry. "You need to get out. You need to shake this off." "I can't," Ilara whispered, the words barely audible. "He won't let me." "Who, honey? Who won't let you?" Ilara just shook her head, unable to speak the impossible truth. Her mother would think she was breaking. And maybe she was. The leash of responsibility. The most terrifying thing about Shadow was his leash. It appeared 6 months after the dog himself. It was made of rough hemp rope, charcoal black, and it looped around Shadow's thick neck, the other end tied securely around Ilara's dominant wrist. She hadn't put it there. She had just woken up one morning and it was fixed, the knots impossibly tight. The rope was a constant, coarse friction on her skin. It didn't allow her to walk more than a foot or two from Shadow. If she tried to stray, the rope would pull taut, digging into her wrist, causing a faint, phantom burning sensation. One day, she was standing at the edge of the woods, wanting desperately to follow a deer path that wound up a hill, promising a view of the entire valley. The view was freedom. Shadow sat firmly at the base of a maple tree. Ilara took one determined step up the path. The rope yanked. She took a second step. The rope dug in. The phantom burn, intensifying. She looked back at Shadow. He hadn't moved, but his head was lowered, his eyes fixed on her with an expression that was pure, profound disappointment. It wasn't malice. It was dependence. The message was clear. If you leave, I am alone. If I am alone, I will crush this spot with my grief. So Ilara stopped. She sat down next to him, and the rope slackened immediately. The pressure eased, replaced by the familiar, weary weight of his flank pressed against hers. It was then she understood. Shadow wasn't just her grief. He was her responsibility for her grief. He was the physical manifestation of her feeling that if she allowed herself to be happy, if she moved on, she was betraying the pain, and by extension, betraying the family she had lost. The dog park and the golden retriever. Ilara was 18 when she met Daniel at the dog park. She had gone there because it was the only place where people routinely ignored her odd behavior. People at the dog park are focused on their own animals, their own chaos. She sat on a bench, Shadow, a heavy shadow at her feet, his leash a tight, rough band on her wrist. Daniel was throwing a tennis ball for a ridiculously cheerful, fluffy golden retriever named Sunbeam. Sunbeam was all light and movement, a happy blur of muscle and slobber. Daniel was kind, with an easy smile. He was the first person in a year who seemed genuinely interested in her, not her sadness. He talked about college applications and bad sci-fi movies. The first time Daniel tried to take her hand, Shadow reacted. As Daniel's fingers brushed hers, Shadow let out a low, guttural, entirely silent growl. Simultaneously, the rope leash on Ilara's wrist tightened so violently it felt as if her skin was being torn. A sudden, sharp spike of ice-cold pain shot up her arm. Ilara flinched, snatching her hand back. "Whoa, what's wrong?" Daniel asked, concerned. "Nothing, sorry," she mumbled, massaging her wrist, which looked completely normal but felt bruised to the bone. "Just a spasm." Shadow settled instantly, his dense body pressing against her leg again, demanding her attention. The incident was repeated multiple times. Every time Daniel drew near, every time he offered a compliment or suggested a future outing, Shadow would growl, the leash would tighten, and the physical weight would increase, forcing her to withdraw. The fear wasn't about the dog leaving. It was about the dog staying and blocking everything else. The weight of her past was actively sabotaging her future. Finally, 3 weeks later, Daniel sat beside her on the bench. Sunbeam, panting happily, dropped a ball near their feet. "Elara," Daniel said, his smile gone, replaced by a serious, patient look. "You're constantly pulling away. It's like something is physically dragging you down. I can't see it, but I can feel you fighting it." Elara looked at Shadow, who was the size of a small bear now, his coat absorbing the sunlight, a black hole of density. "It's true," she admitted, her voice hollow. "Something is." "And what is it?" It's the feeling that if I let myself be happy, I'm forgetting someone important," she finally said, saying the impossible truth in different words. "That if I walk away from the feeling, I lose a part of myself, a part of my family." Daniel didn't scoff. He reached out and picked up Sunbeam's ball, turning it over in his hands. "You know what Sunbeam does every morning?" he asked. "He goes out to the yard and he digs up the flower bed. He makes a total mess. And every day I have to go out and patch it up, replant the things he destroyed." Elara frowned. "What's your point?" "My point is, you don't get rid of the dog. You don't try to bury him," Daniel said, looking directly at her. "You give him a job. You give him his own corner of the yard where he's allowed to dig. He still exists, but he's not in charge of the whole garden." Loosening the knot, that night Elara sat alone in the quiet house, staring at Shadow, who was lying like a boulder across the threshold of her bedroom. The rough leash around her wrist felt like a handcuff. "You don't get rid of the dog. You give him a job." "All right, Shadow," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "This is your job. You are the guard. You keep the memories safe. You keep the past intact. But you don't get to drive the car." She reached down, her trembling fingers finding the coarse hemp rope on her wrist. She felt the phantom pain immediately, the wrenching, deep ache of betrayal and abandonment. Shadow lifted his massive head, his eyes burning amber, watching her. The weight around her chest intensified, a crushing vice. "Stop," the pressure seemed to say. "I am heavy because I am important. You cannot let go of important things." "You are important," Elara told him, gasping through the weight. "But you are not everything." With a sudden, fierce determination born of a year of quiet suffering, Elara grabbed the knot. She didn't try to pull the rope off. She began to pick at the tightness. It was slow, agonizing work. Each thread she loosened sent a jolt of psychic cold through her arm. Tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but of the pure, visceral pain of separation. She picked and pulled and strained until, with a sharp, final ping, the knot gave way. The rope went slack. Elara pulled the black hemp leash off her wrist. Her skin was perfectly clear, but it felt impossibly light, almost ethereal. Shadow didn't vanish. He didn't even move. He was still the dense, magnificent dog of grief. But the moment the leash came off, his body shrank. He didn't become smaller in frame, but in density. He was still heavy, but he was no longer an anchor. He was merely a dog. He stood up, stretched, and walked over to the corner of the room, settling himself under her writing desk. He was still black, still quiet, still there, but he was now relegated to his corner of the yard. Elara stood up. She took a full, glorious, completely unimpeded breath. She walked across the room, and her stride was light. She reached the door and looked back. Shadow was watching her, his amber eyes calm. He was guarding the memories, not her. She smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. The next day, she went to the dog park. She sat on the bench, Shadow a manageable, quiet weight beneath the desk in her empty bedroom. She talked to Daniel for an hour. Then, when Daniel suggested they leave the park and get a pizza, Elara simply stood up, light and free, and followed him out. She didn't look back, but she knew. The black dog was still home, but for the first time in a year, he was no longer walking her. Approx. 2050 words.